no person shall be held or detained except that they will be judged by their equals. That's completely fallen on its face. In all of the Western countries where they have the concept of habeas corpus, being a Muslim today accused of something to do with quote-unquote terrorism will have you facing something that is not justice. And the minimum we can say is this: whatever our differences, whatever our faiths, whatever our madhahib, whatever they happen to be, we can understand, we can come together on this basis. The concept of justice, adl, hakm, these are all words, names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The concept of justice is something that the Prophet ﷺ said the opposite when relating the Hadith Qudsi. يا عبادي إني حرمت الظلم على نفسي وجعلت بينكم محرما فلا تظالموا. My servants, I have made dhulm, oppression, upon you, haram, and made it upon you haram, so do not oppress. And the Quran also says, لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. Do not oppress and do not be oppressed. So dear brothers and sisters, inshallah, if there's one message we leave at the end of all of this in the month of the Quran, it is that we hold on to the Quran and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma ja'al al-Quran rabi'a qulubina wa nura sudurina, that it becomes the light of our hearts and it becomes something that saves it. Allahumma ja'al al-Quran fi layali anisi ya rabbil alamin. Oh Allah, make the Quran something that becomes attached to my heart and a solace to my heart in my mind. And finally, I ask you to make this dua. Allahumma fuqqa qayda ikhwanana al-ma'surin wa ruddahum ila ahlihim salimin ghamin. Oh Allah, free our brothers, the prisoners, and release them and return them safe back to their homes and to their families.
Indeed, we all strive in this month to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our acts, in our ibadat. The topic of discussion was the Quran. Brothers, we need to take a lesson from what the Prophet said, because we don't want to be amongst those on Yawm al-Qiyamah when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be judging us, and in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the messenger will stand and he will say, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّ إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. Oh my Lord, this is my ummah who neglected the Quran. We do not want to be amongst those people on Yawm al-Qiyamah that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam will point at, that these are the people of my ummah who neglected the Quran. We only happen to read it in the month of Ramadan, and after that we forget. And it is indeed in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in many ayats of the Quran. For example, in Surah Munafiqun, Allah says, وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتُ فَيَقُولَ رَبِّ لَوْلَا أَخَّرْتَنِي إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ قَرِيبٍ. Allah says, spend in my way what I've given you before a time comes and you will have regrets, because at that time you won't be given another opportunity to return to do those good deeds. So with that in mind, brothers, this event was organized as a fundraiser for caged prisoners. Brother Abdul Wajid will be coming around with a bucket. All the money that will be raised will go towards those prisoners and towards their campaigns and towards supporting their families. As I mentioned earlier, most of the brothers who are the main breadwinners for the families are inside the prisons. So their families, the wives, the children, have no one left to support them. And it's our responsibility. It falls on our shoulders to support them. So please, brothers and sisters at the back, donate generously, for all your money will be going to a good cause. Jazakumullah khair. In 5 minutes, if any brothers have got any questions related to the topic, please ask. If you want to speak to Brother Moazzam after Salah, during Iftar, you are free to do so. Jazakumullah khair. questions being asked by a text message. I'll read the question out. I have read with the account of other prisoners like yours that the Quran gave a unique comfort when it was read during your time in captivity. Can you please elaborate on this? May briefly mention it. Like Yusuf
Of course, the Quran is something that each time I read it, and I think each time you read it, it brings new meanings to you, new understandings, new ways in which you couldn't have contemplated before. And what place could there be to contemplate the story of Yusuf alayhi salam than in prison inside a cell? I remember weeping so much at the words when Yusuf alayhi salam is confronted with his brothers and they discover who he really is. And they say, أَإِنَّكَ لَأَنْتَ يُوسُف? Are you indeed Yusuf? And they apologize. He said, yes. He says, I'm Yusuf. And they expect from him vengeance. They expect him to now use his power as an Aziz to get vengeance for what they did to him, selling him and throwing him into the well. And he says, لا تثريب اليوم. لا تثريب اليوم. There's no vengeance this day. And Yusuf alayhi salam, in all of this, he had gone through so much from a child, it's almost impossible to imagine what great difficulties he'd suffered. He'd lost his entire childhood, entirely. None of us could stand this. And I'm telling you, if your brother did this to your son today, and as a result of that, your brother never saw his son until he's a grown man, he would never speak to him again, probably try to even kill him. If you look at the stories of the Quran and the high standards, moral standards that we find in them, we find it's almost impossible for us to live like that. Yet that is what's required for us, because these stories that are from the Quran are for us in order that we take a lesson from it. So the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, when he says, Rabbi as-sijnu ahabbu ilayya mimma yad'unani ilayh, when he says, oh my Lord, prison is more beloved to me than that which they call me to. I thought, Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very, very few people will take this position. But then, very, very few people will be the ones that we remember.
Any other questions, brothers, from the floor?
Shahid, Moazzam, is it possible you can just quickly go through what's happening in Guantanamo at the minute?
What's taking place at Guantanamo at present, brothers, they've gone past 150 days of the hunger strike. They are force-feeding the brothers. They've just now got an injunction so that they don't force-feed them in Ramadan. And I don't know what's going to happen, but as you know, the force-feeding process, you may have seen there's this video that's gone viral by this, I think he's a revert rapper or something, called Moazzam Begg. And what he does is take a seat in the way Guantanamo force-feeding takes place. His hands are strapped, his legs are strapped, his head is strapped, and a tube is forced into his nose. And he wants to feel and experience what it's like. But once the tube goes into his nose, he can't take it anymore. He tells them to stop. And then they pull the tube out, and he starts crying. This process happens to the brothers at least twice a day, every day on the hunger strikes, those ones who are being force-fed. And there's approximately 50 of those. Out of the 166 prisoners, 106 are on hunger strike. And we may argue to the merits of whether hunger strikes are haram or halal and so forth, but one thing that any alim must know before he gives a fatwa is al-waqi'. He must know the reality of the situation on the ground. So the only person who will give a fatwa about that is somebody who's right there, experiencing what these brothers have for the past 13 years. And so the hunger strike has been something that they've resorted to out of complete desperation. So finally, brothers, again I say, please make dua for them and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relieves them of their distress.